I suppose, do we do the voices music before this, and then then I say, hi, blah blah blah.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, I don't think your idea about biting the Chapo thing where we just kind of goof around at the beginning and bring it in as we go is a terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's good too. I just, you know how it's like our first episode, and so we're going to be a little more formal, and like, obviously we're going to be sort of getting our sea legs. So I just don't anticipate, and like maybe we will, but I don't anticipate it being as sort of like laid back as the beginning of like some other fucking podcast episode would start.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Dave Kempa, the founder and founding editor of Voices River City, starting to revitalize the Voices River City podcast that was started originally by Anthony Sino. I didn't mention him when I did my little Facebook Live feed a couple weeks ago, so I just wanted to mention, Anthony really built something beautiful with the Voices River City podcast, and obviously, I don't think I'll be able to fill his shoes, and he did something very special in his own voice, in his own style, so I definitely I don't think I can try to fill that space, but he wished me Godspeed on this. I think all of us are sort of just very tired of journalism locally, and I think he's just out of the space. But anyway, thank you, Anthony, for all you did with the Voices River City podcast. Thank you for the blessing to keep going with it. And here we are. A couple of things. I am actually not going to be the only announcer on here. I know that's going to upset some of you, but I did that little Facebook thing a few weeks ago where I sort of just talked alone for 25 minutes, and I realized like I could never ever fucking cut it as a one of those conservative radio talk show hosts that sits by himself. So my friend Skylar is sitting here with me.
Hello, everyone.
This is Skylar, and he agreed graciously to be a part of this. We're using a bunch of his like super high tech equipment, which is better than my fucking like MacBook Air. Live streaming on Wi-Fi at a cider house. So I'm really excited about this. And so thank you for being a part of this. Do you want to like tell people kind of who's Skylar?
Yeah, I guess my name's Skylar Henry. I'm a lifelong Sacramentan. I'm a pretty ardent leftist and a carer of how things go in Sacramento. I'm also a huge fan of Dave's work. So when he mentioned he wanted to start this podcast up again and asked me to be a part of it, I was extremely excited to come on board. So here I am. I'm excited to launch this thing off.
Cool. That means a lot. We've known each other for years. Like we had, well, I guess like a mutual friend in Brian.
Sure.
And then just like we've sort of just been. It's a small town, I guess, but you've been going to city council things. You've been pretty active in things. And so our paths have crossed a lot, I guess, recently. So
yeah, and hopefully for the best.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope this show doesn't suck for everyone's sake. We've also, we sort of have built up this drinks after work thing too with our buddy Kelsey too. So I guess that's kind of where this all sort of culminates now. So, here's the concept. Here is what the new format is. Obviously, it's not going to be as like Anthony did a pretty tight show, and he was very good at segmenting it with an intro and saying, okay, I'm going to have these 2-3 people on the show this week. I think we're going to be a little looser with that. So the way this is going to be going is, we'll have episodes with us one-on-one. We will also regularly bring on people who are fighting particular fights here in the Sacramento region. One way I'd like to do these episodes is to kind of have one local angle and one state level angle. I don't think there are... Do you know of any really sort of like kind of leftist perspective California state politics podcasts out there? There might be. I just don't know them if there are.
I'm not aware of anything specific to California, but that doesn't mean anything because I don't know of all the podcasts.
Yeah.
But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's specifically California.
Same. And just the fact that we are here downtown Sacramento, you go to a coffee shop, you're going to meet these fucking people. So like we actually do get to hear what's going on in the state. So I think it's important to sort of have these discussions here too. So I would like one sort of local element, but that also speaks to a state and national level topic. And then also a state level topic on every episode. Obviously, this is again subject to change, but this is sort of where my idea has been and going. One more little thing. You might have heard a little jingle at the beginning here. That was my friend Dean Hawkinson, who is the lead singer of Be Brave, Bold Robot. Dean is a lovely man, and he has been a fan of Voices River City and what we've been about for a while. And he agreed to do that little jingle for us, and that means a lot to me. Dean, if I knew off the top of my head any shows you were doing coming up, I would plug them, but I'm really fucking sorry, man.
We'll look it up and maybe plug it at the end.
Okay, great. Yeah. There you go. So thank you, Dean. And why don't we get started?
Sounds great.
Cool. So we do have a couple of celebratory White Claws. One thing I wanted to focus on this week was really the rent control fight, right? You've been following along on that.
Yeah.
And what's been going down with that is effectively city council struck a deal with a couple of housing rights groups and SEIU 1000, I believe it was. And they came up with sort of a renter's rights, sort of a rent control-ish type deal. Do you remember the specifics of that?
You're talking about the one that was like the compromise that city council and the mayor were willing to go with, and did go with.
Yeah. Well, I guess before that there was a ballot initiative,
right, for
very robust renters protections that would have capped rent control at 5%.
5%.
So your rent couldn't go up more than 5% on a given year. It would have given protections for no-cause evictions.
Right.
And also there would be sort of a mediating body, third-party body in place that would listen to the tenant versus a landlord in any dispute. And they have things like that in multiple cities like Berkeley and others. That's been very positive. That was on the ballot initiative. We had renters' rights advocates who pulled together 47,000 signatures throughout the state, and this was set to be effectively on the spring, I want to say, ballot.
Yeah.
So this coming March.
Yeah, in March.
In the lead-in to that, this ended up being a big poker chip for some of the housing advocates groups. So the mayor and city council members sat down with some of these groups. I think they probably also sat down with some of the business leaders too, right? So maybe the Metro Chamber, things like that. And they worked out a deal that was a little, the people on the left call it milquetoast.
Right.
It was a somewhat weaker. What were the details of that one?
Substantially weaker in terms of where the rent cap was set. So the initial one that was proposed for the ballot was going to be 5% max. The one that they ended up going with was a 6% max, and also it factors in for inflation, which adds about 2.7%. So we're really talking closer to a 9% max, which is it's almost twice what the other one was. It also has nothing in it about like this
That third party kind
the
of
third
arbiter
party thing.
space.
Yeah. So that's not a part of it. It also, the original bill, as I understand it, or the original proposal, as I understand it, had some kind of a clause that made it so that if landlords were to evict somebody on the basis of like renovation or like a thing that they were legally allowed to do, they did have to compensate them with some sort of a displacement or
Right.
Like transitional cost, basically. And that is not in the ordinance that they put into effect.
Okay. So this happened about close to 2 months ago that they struck this deal. The catch with this is they struck this deal with only a few of the players in the housing rights space, right? So there were three main people who were sort of signed onto this initiative that city council had to get to agree to this deal and then agree to pull this initiative from the ballots. So they brought those three to the table, but they didn't bring other groups, right? So Democratic Socialists of America, who were a big part of the signature gathering, not a part of that conversation.
Right.
ACE, not a part of the conversation. ACE is a really great sort of radical civil rights group.
Association of California. I'm not going to get that acronym right.
I won't
either.
They had a lot of great people from the Bay Area that I think were coming out and helping with this. But I think they have
great
a
people
group out
all
here.
over California.
Yeah, they've got a group here too.
Yeah.
So they were not a part of that conversation, and there were a couple other groups too that weren't. So when this deal was made, it really split up the housing advocacy spaces, right? There were some people who went up and were like, this is really good. I've fought for 10 years on this, and it's great to see, that we've come up with something that can protect renters. And then a lot of the other, I guess, somewhat more progressive or more radical groups were like, listen, we weren't a part of this conversation. We don't like this, and we want to continue to go ahead with this ballot measure. They had another argument too with regarding the signatures, right?
Yeah, I'm not 100% clear on that. To me, what it seems like is that this is a pretty familiar sort of moderate versus left argument where the ordinance that they went through with, the compromise, was, like Hansen had something to say about, this is like a great first step, and like we're going to make it. And so it is like that incrementalism thing that moderates like love for some reason, like doing little pieces of progress, and leftists are kind of in their space of being like, that's not enough, it's not good enough, like, like we want what we want,
right?
And that seems like that has translated almost completely directly to this fight in Sacramento.
It did, yeah,
with the same players.
And so two of the three people who signed on, one of them, I don't recall either of their names, but they said, okay, yeah, we'll pull this ballot measure. A third person, I believe, said she would. Nobody really knows what happened at that table except for the people who were at that table, and I think there might be differing stories there.
Yeah, there's definitely conflicting reports. Like I've talked to, or asked some people who are like somewhat close to this, and they have told me there was never a deal and that the whole thing is hokum. I don't know. Like I don't. I have nothing else. I'll be, like you said, nobody except who was in the room.
Yeah,
can say for sure.
The accepted storyline, I guess, that the Bee is sort of pushing forward is that one woman on the housing advocates' side, one of the three people who are needed to pull the ballot measure initiative, Michelle Pariset of Public Advocates, they claim that she went back on her word and she said, you know what, no, I'm not going to pull this initiative. This should be on the ballots. The people of Sacramento should decide on if this is a good thing for them or not, because 47,000 people signed this. And if we just have this deal and throw that out, then we're circumventing the will of the people of Sacramento. Right. And Michelle, actually, when this deal first came through, she got rained on sort of the hard left side too. And that was a bummer for me to watch because for as long as I've known her, she's fought for people with nothing. So that kind of was a bummer to see. I kind of had faith that she would, end up on this side saying like, you know what, this is the right thing to do. We're going to do this. Once she did that, then the Sacramento Bee, well, first of all, Mayor Steinberg wrote a little tweet
Right.
saying like, we came to this deal with good faith, and we've held up our end of it, and we really think that everybody else should hold up their end, implying that Michelle had sort of reneged, had lied to them, and was now acting in bad faith, right? And there's some irony there too, because he tweeted that on the same day that the Board of Supervisors, the Sacramento Board of Supervisors, voted down a temporary moratorium on no-cause evictions just until, and it was just a temporary moratorium until this deal came into action. The Board of Soups shut that down because two supervisors wouldn't agree to it. One of them worked with the California Apartment Association. The other one was just like, what you should do is just save up money and buy a home. Like this is your problem, right? And so you see something like that happen, and then you see something like the mayor implying like, oh, this is bad faith on the part of somebody who's just like fighting for people to stay in their homes. And it really makes you kind of wonder, like, wait, okay, what are our definitions of bad faith, and what are the metrics and determinants there? When you look at the Bee 2 days later, the Bee editorial board wrote a piece calling out Michelle personally. You read this, right?
Yeah, and like basically, accusing her of reneging, accusing her of coming to the deal in bad faith, of putting the entire cause of rent control in jeopardy by, being malicious about it or whatever. It was fairly aggressive language.
Yeah,
I thought.
And so then you get that from the Bee too, right? That's sort of, all of this was very surprising for me to see, I guess. When we talk about, again, let's go back to the good faith versus bad faith, right? They call out Michelle personally for this, but last year, when there was the other renters' rights fight going on, we at Voices covered when a bad faith player on the anti-renters' rights side went on Fox 40, lied, claimed he was a local renter, and said, this is why I'm against all of these renters protections, when it turned out that he was on the board of I think it was the Real Estate or the Renters Association, which gave $100,000 to the fight against this initiative.
I was at a city council meeting where we were going to be talking about rent control, and then they bust in something like 100 people in matching T-shirts from like out of town,
right,
to like pack out the room so we couldn't get in.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody could speak against it. Like, dude, you want to talk about bad faith? Dude, that's trash. Like,
absolutely.
That's absolute trash.
And so the guy who went on TV on Fox 40, he actually works for Turton Real Estate. He also was on this board that was paying all this money to sort of confuse the discourse on renters' rights. And not only that, I was hearing talk from people that he also no longer lives within Sacramento city limits.
Right.
Great. This whole thing was put on, this whole circus was put on by Josh Wood of Region Business, I guess is what they're called now. Josh has pretty roundly been considered a bad faith player by elected officials, by other business groups. He's like, they don't end up at the table during these conversations. The Bee never wrote about that. The Bee never wrote about, how he was doing sort of rat fucking type political charades and getting away with it, right?
Right.
They come out and say that Michelle's doing bad faith behavior by doing nothing other than saying, listen, we should put this to the voters because we got 47,000 signatures.
That right there is the part that's like so wild to me, because the resistance isn't, it's not like this thing is going to pass for sure. The resistance is to put it on the ballot so that Sacramentans can vote on it.
Right.
And that, I mean, like that by no means, I mean, like, as you said, like aforementioned fucking rat fucking, like they're going to come out with a bunch of misinformation to like fuck people up, and it's going to work, you know, to a degree. So it's already like, even if that gets on the ballot, it's an uphill fight still, like all the way up to March, you know, but they don't even want that.
They don't even want that fight.
Which is fucking wild to me. Like it's not even like it passes automatically. Sacramento gets to vote on it.
Yeah. This sort of brings us to the Mayor Steinberg side and how he sort of gets to stand there and say, you know, well, grandstand a little bit, right? Like, well, you know, we all sat together and we reached a deal and this was good politics and blah, 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 blah. But like, he is also the guy. He was the head of the state Senate in 2011. He was Senate Pro Tempore when Jerry Brown, the governor, basically got rid of our redevelopment dollars wholesale, right? So these were the dollars that were supposed to go to cities and municipalities to start funding low-income and extremely low-income dollars. And this went away on Darrell's watch. He agreed to this stuff. And then not only that, but then he said, well, we'll get rid of it, but then we'll bring together sort of a lighter redevelopment situation, and we'll be able to take care of you know, those low-income units with this new kind of deal. But then that one didn't end up ever happening, right? That second bill never happened. And so the low-income people of California just never got that money. Housing, low-income housing, building towards that dried up throughout the state. So, you know, this guy who talks all this talk about like, well, you know, we got to come here in good faith. Like, he was a part of a real major moment that created this situation.
Right.
And now he gets to sit on as the mayor of city council. He gets to sit as the head of the homelessness initiative in the state. But he doesn't own up to any of that culpability of what role he played in that process, in creating this ecosystem that we have today.
Right. Well, I mean, and not only that, but you can't sit there and talk about good faith, bad faith if you are accepting as many campaign contributions from outside players as this guy does.
Yes.
Like that 100%, you sign away your rights to talk about anybody else acting in bad faith ever again when you take in as much money. I mean, you've done quite a bit of work kind of tracking his campaign contributions. Like, can you kind of go into that like a little bit? Can you?
Yeah. So it was a little bit me, but really the main driver behind it was friend of the show, Sac Snark. May he come back to Twitter someday in his final form. But he actually came up with the idea of sort of showing some follow the money type elements of all of these city officials that we have and the kind of money that goes into their campaigns. It's a pretty well-known fact in our state that developers, builders tend to buy elections. They tend to buy their council members. And, you know, Steinberg and a lot of his colleagues are like, no, they're no exception. This is a guy, again, it's bad faith when Michelle does what she does for the sake of 47,000 voters getting to have their say.
Right, because she wants people to be able to vote on something that is happening to them in their city.
Right, but he's allowed to sit at this table and act like he is, you know, just a good faith player when the day that he was elected, he started reaching out to developers to find ways to fund his election party at the California Railroad Museum, right? You look at his contributions, campaign contributions from the last 4 years, and there are, I think it's nearish now, $70,000 from either explicitly anti-renters' rights groups or implicitly anti-renters' rights groups. Back in June, I think it was June 3rd. Let's look at this. So 15-day time span. June 3rd, Darrell Steinberg gets a contribution from Momahana, very well-known developer in the region, pretty powerful guy. He sends him $3,500, which is the maximum amount a single person can
legally allowed to contribute.
This was June 3rd of 2019. 1 week later, June 10th, he gets the exact same amount from, guess who? Another developer, Mark Friedman. Mark Friedman is the guy that I think he got the deal for the arena, right? He developed the arena, among other very big projects throughout the city. Mark Friedman gives him $3,500. Now, that's the maximum amount he can give him. Get this. 1 week later, imagine this. Mark Friedman's mom and his wife each give Darrell Steinberg $3,500. Like, what a coincidence.
And the Friedmans are really all about Dare Bear.
Yeah, who doesn't love Dare Bear and the Dare Bear cousins? So, like, you look at things like that, and you can go. We'll send the link for Voices River City to Steinberg's contributions. We color code it too, so you can see very clearly where the money's coming from and kind of what the interests are. But Darrell's been implicitly swayed in this game for as long as he's been in office. Not only that, like, when we talk about renters' protections, who do you think has his ear more often? Does the person, getting shoved out of their apartment complex in South Sac or in Arden, do they have his cell number?
Right.
Or does a builder like Tykert or someone like Mark Friedman have his cell number?
Right.
Does the head of these business organizations, they get to sit down with Darrell? They have like weekly coffees with these politicians. Like the way that the discourse is skewed in their direction, it's very, very hard to overstate. And so Darrell sits down at this table and he wants to find a middle ground when really the middle ground, had he listened to 250,000 renters,
right,
and then these people, had they all had the same amount of time to discuss this, it would be a very different conversation.
Right.
People are being ignored in this. I'm going on a rant. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I share your frustration, and I think you're right. Like, obviously, the conversation as far as city council and the mayor are concerned is dictated by developers. And people, people like the people who work with ACE and DSA or whatever, who kind of are basically people who like kind of do this in what little free time they have, are made to feel as if they're just lucky to be in the room and like allowed to speak at all, which is,
and they're not allowed in the room sometimes.
Right, exactly.
They weren't at the table,
right,
during these negotiations,
right, and then and even when that would be bad enough, but then when they show up with like 47,000 signatures and to have the city's leadership be like, well, maybe we'll put this on the ballot, maybe we won't. It's fucking trash, man.
Insane.
It's garbage.
And they just act like this is how it should work. This is proper protocol. Darrell, he loves his decorum. So as long as no one's screaming, like that's
dude, Darrell and
this
his
is
decorum,
politics,
man.
Yeah,
he loves that decorum.
He does. So I just wanted to kind of lay that one out for listeners. I don't think that it's been kind of discussed enough, and I don't think it can be discussed too much. It's just very important. At the end of the day, I really do think Michelle did the right thing. I think she should be commended for it, and I think that the e-board, the editorial board at the Bee, just really got this wrong. Okay, I'm gonna say something. The Bee's editorial board has gone in a good direction recently, and like there are people on it that I actually like. I really like. But when I read that piece, it's hard for me to think that anyone but Marcos Bertone wrote that.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else on that
Who did
board.
write that? I wasn't even paying attention.
He must have written that.
I don't think it was him.
Well, it was just the blank name editorial board.
Okay.
So sometimes they do that, right?
Yeah.
And like I don't know the full politics of it, but like there is a vote that has to be taken. So like, there was a vote, and like it probably did come out like, oh, well, she did go back on what she said, and then he went off and wrote it probably, allegedly.
Yeah.
It's hard not to think it wasn't him.
I mean, it does kind of feel like something he would say, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
And this is just a guy that, like, he really likes to take the party line of whoever is mayor. Like, he made such a change on homelessness, and I started asking myself why that is. It's because the mayor has a different view on homelessness.
Right.
And so now he's taking a more human view of it.
Dude, he wants to be getting coffee once a week.
He does. Yeah, no,
dude.
that's exactly.
He wants to be hanging out.
Marcos, get coffee with me. I was at and this could be a whole different episode on like leadership programs in the region. We love our leadership programs. I was at this thing called the what is it? The ALF dinner. Do you know what ALF is?
No.
It's like the American Leadership Forum, something like that. And basically this has been around for like 25, 30 years, and they have like a class of 18 to 25 people every year. And they're all like the big heavy hitter leaders in the region. I got into this dinner, it's just a fancy dinner. I don't know how I got into it. I got into it through, I think it was a free ticket through another leadership fellowship that I was in called NELP. That's a whole nother story. But I like to sneak into these things on occasion. When I was at this dinner, Marcos was there, and the way that he approached and fawned over Darrell and just really wanted to get a picture with him, like I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed as a fellow member of the media. And he was like that with KJ too. Like he's apolitical. It's just like he just loves those seats of power.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done with Marcos.
Well, let's take this before we leave the rent control thing behind. What are some steps? What are some action steps that people listening to this who are interested in either helping or like want to be informed and want to do the right thing here? Like, what can we ask people to do, or where can we refer them?
So I would leave that to you to answer that. I think you know that a little bit better than I do. I do think so. The tenants union, they did come forward, and they are threatening to sue Darrell Steinberg and the city council if they don't put this ballot initiative on the March ballot.
And the deadline for that is 30 days from when they did it, which I believe was the 6th.
November 6th. So it'll probably be like March or December 5th or something.
So one thing right out the gate that I know that is helpful if you are somebody who wants to take part in any of this is there's a city council meeting on the 5th, which is the day before. And I strongly suggest that you show out to City Hall and support, even if you don't say anything, just to be a supportive person in the room is a huge thing. It's free. And if you've done it before, you know what you're getting into. If you've never done it before, it's more interesting than you think it's going to be. So that's a thing. December 5th. City Council, I believe that starts at 5. I'm going to look that up real quick.
Depends. Bring your decorum.
Definitely don't just cuss at Darrell Steinberg.
This is funny.
It's the 3rd is when it is. So it's the 3rd at 5 p.m.
Okay. I like that you're doing this call to action. Actually, I want to take a moment, too, to discuss, I'm, still in journalism. I still do some writing sometimes. But this podcast and this iteration of it is kind of me saying, fuck it. And, sort of taking off the gloves and just saying, this is the state of Sacramento, of California politics. And, you become very encumbered by certain rules within my industry that now that I'm making money in other places, I can just come out now and just be like, listen, guys, this is what's going down and this is what I think is wrong. And it's going to be very freeing for me, but I still find myself balking at things like a call to action.
Yeah.
Somebody coming inside.
Yeah. I think
Darrell?
Darrell Steinberg is knocking at my door.
Friend of the show, Darrell Steinberg?
Friend of the show, Dare Bear is here.
Did you know that one of his main PR people is a former Bee editor?
I did not know that.
And did you know the PR person for the city manager's office is a former Bee editor? Like, this is how
That's pretty incestuous,
intertwined
isn't
this
it?
stuff is. Yeah, and like, you know, I get it. We leave the industry, we go into PR roles. Like, I've had my share of things like that too.
Sure,
but
but
like,
when it's a small town like Sacramento, that feels real intense.
and
right?
some of these kids are interviewing their former bosses.
Right.
Like, it just, I don't know.
Well, the reason I like to do the call to action is because I feel like for me, like, a big part of this, of doing a show like this, is to get the information out to people who might not already have it, or to educate people who would like to be educated on a subject. And I think a critique of the city and its leadership, especially in this instance, is warranted and healthy and good.
Yeah.
But I am also a believer that I like to balance out the critique with some some sort of piece of some sort of optimism, or some sort of
right.
here's how, like, things are bad. Yes. Like, there are bad actors, there are bad things happening, but there's a reason to hope, there's a light. And if you are fired up about this, this is what you can do. So I like, if it's okay with you, I'm going to kind of be a proponent
Dude,
of that.
absolutely.
as we
But
go.
like, this is also why, you need to be a part of this, right? And like this does happen in journalism too, like in solutions journalism, like in climate change stuff. It's like, here's the problem. This is really bad. Oh man, this is really bad. And then you get people sort of riled up and feeling things, and they're like, what do we do? And then that's your later articles, right? Like, here are things that seem to be working, regarding climate change. Here are things people are doing to affect change. So yeah, it totally makes sense to me. And like, actually, in early episodes of this podcast, I think Anthony was very good at kind of providing spaces for people to go to, or opening it up for guests to provide options for folks. So no, it all makes sense to me.
Cool.
Yeah. So maybe that's it on that topic.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So we don't need to talk about Eric Swalwell.
The story about Eric Swalwell farting on camera has just broken as of the recording of this podcast.
We've just caught wind.
Maybe we'll wait for all the facts to roll in, and we'll do a follow up on Eric Swalwell's fucking butthole.
Depending on how much time you have to edit, maybe we'll put a little clip in. But we were discussing before the show, and I at first thought it was, what is it, Chris Williams, or who was the guy interviewing him?
I can't remember.
Some MSNBC guy.
No, I think it's a real thing, man.
No, I thought it was him who'd farted, like this interviewer. But like,
no, 100%.
Swalwell stops talking, makes the face,
and, he, like,
and then there's the noise.
And he just keeps going. I will give him that, man. It doesn't stop him. He's just like,
there's like an
he's
impish,
just barreling down.
There's like a puckish twinkle in his eye.
A puckish twinkle in his eye.
I don't know. Okay, anyway, just real quick, just on a state level, at the beginning of October, the Secretary of State releases voter registration information every once in a while. And they released their first one in about 8 months in early October. And what we learned from that is basically that the Republican Party in California is fucking dead. I've written a little bit about the death knell of the party in the Sacramento News and Review, and the numbers just continue to show the same thing, right? Their percentage is it's below 24% of all registered voters. Democrats are up above, at least above 42. I want to say it's hovering around 44. And then even no party preference voters, which we now know lean to the left, there's even more of them than there are Republicans.
Registered GOP.
And so the GOP is for all intents and purposes fucked. There's a reason why there's a Democratic supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly. Not only supermajority of like 67%, 75% fully of both of those houses are Democrats.
Yeah, it's not even close.
All statewide offices, there's 9. There hasn't been a Republican holding that office, any of those 9 offices, since 2006, I want to say. And then on top of that, the last 2 Senate races, we haven't even had a Republican in the general election.
It's Democrat
Dem
versus
on Dem.
Yeah.
And the reason that we have these Dem on Dem races is because we changed our voting system in 2010. I think it was called Prop 14. We had, and forgive me if that's wrong, but we passed a law that basically said we're going to have a jungle primary, and the top 2 people who come out of that primary, no matter their party, are going to run against each other one-on-one in the general election. Now, progressives did not like that. They were like, oh no, we're not going to get our people elected. We're not going to get them in through the general, because they had a really pretty sound way to get their progressive candidates to go up against the centrists in the Democratic primaries, right? So there's a new system. They didn't like it. I am starting to believe that there's more of an inroad for them now than was originally expected. In part because the Republican Party is basically self-immolating.
Right.
But now that there are almost twice as many Democrats in the state as there are Republicans, in 75% of races in the assembly, so in about 60 out of the 80 races in the assembly every 2 years, a Republican doesn't even make the general. So there's only 20 Senate elections every year because it's a 4-year term.
Sure.
So there's 40 seats in the Senate. Out of the 20, there's only 14 or 15 in which a Republican actually makes it through the general. So in these races where it's Dem on Dem or Dem on other party or Dem on, someone's not going against them, I think there's a lot of room for the progressives / leftists. And I think, it's possible they'll have to make friends, be friendly for certain races, up against some of the more business-oriented Democrats, some of the capitalist Dems. One thing I've noticed, and I talk to business leaders in the region, and they don't disagree, that the business Dems and the Republicans, the few that are like the adult in the room Republicans that are like not racist, but they're like still like very like laissez-faire capitalists.
Sure.
There's no difference between them. There's no difference between those adult, quote, again, I'm doing air quotes, adult in the room Republicans and business Dems. So the Democratic Party is having this huge, huge umbrella, and there's this huge fight for the soul of the party that happens in these weird spaces, right? Like the A-Dem elections, which is a weird Democratic Party thing that no one really knows about yet. I've written about that in Cap Weekly. I can give a link to that. Or at these Democratic conventions, like the one that just happened in Long Beach. Rest in peace, Bradley Noel.
Nice shout out.
Thank you. I've totally lost my train of thought.
We were in Long Beach.
Oh, right. The Democratic convention. So there's fights that happen there where they're deciding, like, do we endorse particular candidates? Did we just have a Swalwell moment? What was that?
Yeah, what was that? I heard that too.
I hope that got picked up.
I hope the mics picked that up.
Okay.
Like
that was
dude, we got Dare Bear at the door and Eric Swalwell behind my couch.
Dude, I told you these ass mics were a bad idea. So anyway, so I really do think that we're turning kind of in a weird way to a party agnostic state in some ways. I've tried pitching this storyline to like a bunch of national outlets, and they're all like, "Yeah, we're interested, but like, we don't believe you." And like, you just time needs to pass before like anything like that sort of comes to fruition. But I mean, I think I follow this stuff pretty closely, and that's kind of how I see politics carrying out in this state in the future. But who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong.
It is a best case scenario, right? Like I guess not a best case scenario. We're not talking about like a Star Trek utopia here yet, but like, I think it's a good sign of progress if it is in fact true. If we can, and it's my understanding that sort of in the history of the country, California and New York, the coast kind of do their thing, and the rest of the country is pulled along
right.
as we go. And if we are getting to a point in California where the discussion is no longer, but like where Republicans are obsolete. And so now the discussion is between centrist, moneyed Democrats and leftists. That is a great space.
It's a good sign.
That is a sign of progress no matter what, just if that's the conversation.
Let me
right?
put a couple more data points out here, too, to sort of drive this home. I talked with Paul Mitchell, who's, I think, VP at Political Data Inc., and super crazy smart dude, early in the year. And he mentioned to me that of all the registered voter deaths in California, 45% are Republicans.
You said deaths.
Deaths.
Okay.
So you're a registered voter and you died. There's a 45% chance you're Republican.
That you're Republican.
Out of the pre-registered 16 and 17-year-olds, we have a new pre-register system. Democrats are getting registered more than Republicans at a rate of 3-1, basically. So it's like 13.4% of teens are registering.
That suggests like a snowball effect.
Yeah, totally.
Like it's exponential at this point.
And
right?
Democrats are at like, what is it? It's like almost 40% in that age group. And then no party preference is over 50%, I believe, which sort of tells you that like, well, not over 50 if it's nearish 50. So it's higher than both. In the teenage group, again, that leans left. And again, that might be like a lot further left than we think. When we look at Gen Z, I mean, these kids are, you think like we are progressive, our age group, but you look at them and like they're kind of light years beyond. And like they feel an existential threat from climate change.
Right.
And a lot of them connect a dot between that and capitalism.
Right.
So
well, they understand more than anybody else that incrementalism, like we don't have time for moderate
we have 10
incrementalism.
years.
Yeah, it has to happen now, like right now. And those guys understand that I guess what I'm trying to say is more real for people who are like teenagers right now than it is for maybe me and you,
right.
or like especially like my boomer parents.
Yeah.
You know, there's a real visceral thing there.
I mean, there's a reason I'm not having kids. And,
I would
and not just because I'm poor.
Just because they might listen to this. I love my boomer parents. I'm sorry, Mom.
I love mine too. They were hippies, and like they taught me all I know about having fucking shiny eyes and thinking that the world can be a better place. Yeah. I wanted to sort of outline that sort of trend, and it's not looking good for the California GOP. And I think that leaves an open space for the more progressive folks, and especially young folks. We're a more diverse state, and I think that leads to potential to really show our country kind of what a diverse state looks like and what politics of diversity and equity and inclusivity can look like. So to me, I'm like cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Also, I love Gen Z. They're funny as shit, and I'm also terrified of them. So please don't make fun of our show.
Dude, I can't wait to like it's already kind of happening to me where I like go on Twitter and like don't get it.
Oh no, oh my God, all the time.
Dude, all the time. I kind of love it, honestly.
Somebody sent me a TikTok that her daughters made, and I was trying to show it to some other friends, and I couldn't get the video to play, and they're just looking at me like we're old. Like we don't.
Dude, I had a moment the other day where I was like goofing around on eBay on my phone and thinking about something else and went to Google it and then realized that I was just typing it into eBay's search and was like, oh, fuck, I'm an old man. Oh, this sucks. This is how old people use phones.
It's like the grandpa that like thinks he can only get to his email on his own computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God, it's happening.
Oh, man, it's rough.
All right. I don't think we have much more to discuss this week. I think this was a good intro. Sorry if I ranted a little too much. I look forward to listening to this and seeing how that sounds.
Well, let's close up then. Can you maybe direct us to Voices of River City where we can read more of your work?
Yeah.
And where specifically you would encourage people to look?
So obviously, voicesrivercity.com is the website. I ran that hard for 2 years as sort of a progressive news outlet / space for folks to do opinion pieces that might not get the inches in something like the Bee. I'm not doing that much right now, although I am no longer in like financial crisis and I do have some time. So if you want to write an op-ed, reach out to me. We have a Twitter. It's at Voices River City. On Facebook, we're Voices River City, obviously. You can subscribe to the podcast. We are on all the podcast things, basically. We're also on Patreon. So if you want to help chip in, this, a lot of time goes into this. So patreon.com/Voices River City. That would very much help us out. I guess that's all I got.
Sweet.
Cool. Thank you for listening, everyone, if you made it this far.
All right. Well, hey.
Good amount of fart jokes.
I think...
Sublime reference.
Yeah, that like derailed the conversation. Yeah. That was great. Good first step, man.
And then a sack snark. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're good. Cool. Any other like culturally appropriate? What's trending on the Twitter?
Oh, I'm not fucking with that, man.
Let's just get the fuck off.
All right, man.
All right. Thanks for listening.